The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as Marcus Blackwood clutched his chest, his face contorting in agony. The pharmaceutical billionaire had just been celebrating the launch of his latest medical device when his world suddenly tilted sideways. Around him, the black tie gala continued for a moment in blissful ignorance until someone screamed, "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." "Call 911, shouted Dr. Patricia Wells, the chief cardiologist from St. Mary's Hospital, who had been enjoying the evening's festivities. She rushed to Marcus's side as he collapsed, his expensive tuxedo now wrinkled against the cold floor of his penthouse ballroom. The 62-year-old mogul was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and erratic. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present that the man who had made billions from medical technology was now desperately in need of medical intervention himself. Dr. Wells quickly assessed his condition, her trained hands checking his pulse while barking orders to the panicked guests. "This looks like a massive heart attack," she announced grimly. "We need to get him to a hospital immediately, but—" She paused, checking her watch and shaking her head. "The nearest cardiac surgery unit is 40 minutes away through downtown traffic. In his condition, I'm not sure he'll make it." Marcus's wife, Victoria, had been upstairs when the commotion began. She came rushing down in her silk evening gown, her face pale with terror. "What's happening? Marcus, can you hear me?" She knelt beside her husband, whose eyes were beginning to flutter closed. "Ma'am, your husband needs immediate cardiac surgery," Dr. Wells explained urgently. "His heart is failing rapidly. We need to move him now, but the ambulance is stuck in traffic from the construction on Fifth Avenue. The backup route will take even longer." Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. "I'll call our private helicopter. We can airlift him to the medical center." But even as she dialed, she knew precious minutes were ticking away. Marcus had always prided himself on being prepared for any business emergency, but no amount of wealth could fast-track medical care when every second counted. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their equipment clattering as they rushed into the opulent penthouse. They quickly confirmed Dr. Wells' assessment while setting up portable monitoring equipment. Marcus's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly, and his skin had taken on an ashen pallor that made Victoria's stomach drop. "We need surgical intervention within the next 20 minutes, or we're going to lose him," the lead paramedic announced bluntly. "The helicopter pad on the roof is our best bet, but even then, getting him prepped for surgery at the hospital will take time we don't have." As the medical team worked frantically around Marcus, none of them noticed the small figure standing quietly in the doorway leading to the service areas of the penthouse. Carmen Rodriguez had been cleaning up after the gala when she heard the commotion. For the past 8 years, she had worked as the head housekeeper for the Blackwood family, maintaining their sprawling penthouse with meticulous care and remaining largely invisible to the steady stream of powerful guests who frequented their home. Carmen watched the scene unfolding with growing concern. She had grown genuinely fond of Marcus over the years, despite his demanding nature and tendency to treat the household staff as extensions of the furniture. He had his moments of kindness, particularly after his first heart episode 3 years ago when she had been the one to find him and call for help. Since then, she had quietly monitored his health habits, ensuring his medications were properly organized and his diet met the cardiologist's recommendations, even when he tried to sneak forbidden foods. "The helicopter is on its way," Victoria announced, her voice cracking with strain. 10 minutes out." But everyone in the room could see that 10 minutes might be too long. Marcus's breathing had become increasingly labored, and the portable heart monitor was showing dangerous irregularities. Dr. Wells looked up from where she was monitoring Marcus's pulse. "I need to be honest with you, Mrs. Blackwood. Your husband is in cardiogenic shock. His heart is failing to pump blood effectively. Even if we get him to the hospital in the next few minutes, his condition is so unstable that he might not survive the transport." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had been married to Marcus for 15 years, and while their relationship had its challenges, she couldn't imagine a world without him. "There has to be something we can do," she pleaded. "Money is no object. We can fly in any specialist from anywhere in the world." "Ma'am, this isn't about money," Dr. Wells replied gently. "This is about time and immediate intervention. Your husband needs bypass surgery right now. His coronary arteries are severely blocked, and medication alone isn't going to save him. The room fell into a tense silence broken only by the beeping of medical equipment and Marcus's increasingly shallow breathing. The helicopter's rotors could be heard approaching in the distance, but everyone present understood that it might not be enough. Carmen stepped forward quietly, her work uniform a stark contrast to the formal attire of everyone else in the room. She had been debating whether to speak up, knowing that her words would likely be dismissed or ignored. But watching Marcus struggle for each breath, she made her decision. "Excuse me," she said softly, her accented English clear despite her nervousness. "I couldn't help but overhear. You said he needs immediate cardiac surgery?" Dr. Wells barely glanced in her direction, too focused on Marcus's deteriorating condition. "Yes, but unless there's a fully equipped operating room nearby with a cardiac surgeon standing by, there's nothing more we can do except get him to the hospital as quickly as possible." Carmen took another step forward, her heart pounding. "Dr. Wells, I know this might sound impossible, but there is a fully equipped surgical suite on the 15th floor of this building. Mr. Blackwood had it installed 2 years ago for his personal medical consultations." This got everyone's attention. Victoria looked up sharply. "Carmen's right. Marcus converted one of the apartments below us into a private medical facility. He uses it for his annual physicals and minor procedures. But we'd still need a cardiac surgeon." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken desperation. Having the facility was only half the equation. Finding a qualified cardiac surgeon who could perform such a complex operation outside of a hospital setting, with limited support staff and equipment, seemed impossible. Carmen cleared her throat softly. "Mrs. Blackwood, I know this will sound unbelievable, but I am a cardiac surgeon. I performed these procedures for 12 years before coming to work for your family." The statement landed like a bombshell in the room. Dr. Wells turned to stare at Carmen with a mixture of disbelief and hope, while Victoria's mouth fell open in shock. The paramedics exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to take this development seriously or dismiss it as the desperate suggestion of household staff who didn't understand the gravity of the situation. "I'm sorry, what?" Dr. Wells asked, her professional skepticism warring with the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a solution to this impossible situation. Carmen straightened her shoulders, drawing on a confidence she hadn't accessed in years. "My name is Dr. Carmen Rodriguez. I graduated from the Universidad Central de Venezuela School of Medicine and completed my cardiac surgery residency at Hospital Universitario de Caracas. I specialized in coronary artery bypass procedures and valve replacements. I performed over 800 cardiac surgeries before I left Venezuela 8 years ago." The room erupted in a cacophony of questions and disbelief. Victoria stood up abruptly, her evening gown rustling. "Carmen, is this true? You're a doctor, a heart surgeon?" "Yes, ma'am. I maintained my medical knowledge through continuing education online, and I've kept current with the latest techniques and technologies. I know it's difficult to believe, but if Mr. Blackwood truly needs immediate surgery to survive, I can perform the procedure." Dr. Wells stepped closer to Carmen, her eyes intense with scrutiny. "Dr. Rodriguez, assuming you're telling the truth about your credentials, you're talking about performing complex cardiac surgery without a full surgical team, without hospital-grade backup systems, and without the safety net that comes with a full medical facility. Are you prepared to take responsibility for that level of risk?" Carmen met her gaze steadily. "Doctor, I understand the risks involved. But Mr. Blackwood is dying right now. His survival chances decrease with every minute we debate this. If we attempt transport to the hospital, you said yourself he might not survive the journey. At least this way, we can begin intervention immediately." Victoria looked between the two medical professionals, her mind reeling from this revelation about someone who had been living in her home for 8 years. "Carmen, why didn't you ever tell us you were a doctor? Why are you working as a housekeeper?" Carmen's expression softened with old pain. "Mrs. Blackwood, when I left Venezuela, I left everything behind. My medical license, my credentials, my entire professional life. The political situation made it impossible for me to practice there. And starting the revalidation process here would have taken years and money I didn't have. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I needed work immediately, to survive and to send money back to my family. Your husband gave me a job when I desperately needed one. The helicopter landed on the roof with a thunderous noise, its rotors creating a windstorm that rattled the penthouse windows. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio, announcing his arrival and readiness for immediate transport. Dr. Wells looked at Marcus, then at Carmen, weighing impossible odds. Dr. Rodriguez, even if everything you're saying is true, performing cardiac surgery in an improvised setting like this, the mortality risk is enormous. With respect, Doctor, Carmen replied firmly, the mortality risk of doing nothing is 100%. Mr. Blackwood's heart is failing now. Transport will take at least 30 minutes, plus surgery prep time at the hospital. In his current state, those numbers don't work in his favor. Victoria gripped Carmen's arm suddenly. Can you really save him? Can you really perform heart surgery here? Carmen looked down at Marcus, whose breathing had become even more labored. She had sworn an oath years ago to do no harm, but also to preserve life whenever possible. She had left her surgical career behind, out of necessity, not choice. Now, faced with a man whose life hung in the balance, all her training and instincts as a physician came rushing back. I can try, Mrs. Blackwood. I want to be completely honest with you about the risks, but yes, I believe I can perform the surgery he needs. The private medical suite downstairs has state-of-the-art equipment. If we can get him there quickly and stabilize him, I can perform a coronary bypass that should restore blood flow to his heart. The lead paramedic, who had been monitoring Marcus throughout this exchange, looked up with grim urgency. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. His blood pressure is dropping critically, and his heart rhythm is becoming increasingly unstable. Victoria made the decision that would change everything. Carmen, if you think you can save my husband, then please, do whatever you need to do. Dr. Wells nodded slowly. I'll assist you, Dr. Rodriguez. Between the two of us and the paramedic team, we should have enough hands to manage the procedure. Carmen felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, along with a familiar surge of adrenaline that she remembered from her surgical training. We need to move him to the medical suite immediately. Every second counts now. The team worked together to carefully transport Marcus to the elevator, with the portable monitors and medical equipment creating a makeshift mobile unit. As they descended to the 15th floor, Carmen mentally reviewed the procedure she would need to perform, calling up knowledge and techniques she hadn't used in 8 years but had never forgotten. The private medical facility that Marcus had installed was indeed impressive. It featured a fully equipped surgical suite with modern monitoring equipment, surgical instruments, and even a heart-lung bypass machine that could maintain circulation during the operation. Carmen quickly assessed the available resources while the paramedics transferred Marcus to the surgical table. Dr. Wells, can you handle anesthesia management? Carmen asked, falling naturally into the role of lead surgeon. Absolutely. I've worked with cardiac anesthesia protocols extensively. Excellent. I'll need you to monitor his vital signs throughout the procedure while I work on the bypasses. Paramedic team, I need you to assist with circulation and be ready to provide support for any complications. Victoria stood at the edge of the sterile area, her face pale but determined. Carmen, I need you to know that regardless of what happens, thank you for trying. I had no idea we had been living with a doctor all these years. Carmen paused in her preparations to look at Victoria. Mrs. Blackwood, I want you to understand something. I'm going to do everything in my power to save your husband. But there are no guarantees with surgery this complex, especially under these circumstances. Are you prepared for that? Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. Just, please, give him a chance. As Carmen scrubbed in using the surgical prep station, she felt a transformation taking place. The quiet housekeeper who had spent 8 years invisible in the Blackwood home was giving way to the confident cardiac surgeon she had once been. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she prepared for the most important surgery of her career. Dr. Wells had successfully administered anesthesia and had Marcus stable on the monitors. Dr. Rodriguez, patient is under and stable for now. Blood pressure is still critically low, but he's holding steady. Carmen approached the surgical table, her hands now encased in sterile gloves, her mind focused entirely on the task ahead. She looked down at Marcus, remembering the man who had unknowingly given her a second chance at life 8 years ago when he hired her. Now she had the opportunity to return that favor in the most dramatic way possible. "Beginning incision," she announced, her voice steady and professional. The scalpel moved with practiced precision as she opened Marcus's chest, revealing the heart that was struggling to keep him alive. Years of medical training and experience guided her hands as she prepared to perform the delicate work of rerouting blood flow around the blocked coronary arteries. The surgery would be complex and dangerous, but Carmen had never felt more certain of her purpose. In this moment, she wasn't the invisible housekeeper or the displaced refugee who had lost everything. She was Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, cardiac surgeon, and she had work to do. The scalpel moved with practiced precision as Carmen made the initial incision, her movements betraying none of the nervousness she felt internally. 8 years had passed since she had last held surgical instruments, but muscle memory and years of training guided her hands as she worked to save Marcus Blackwood's life. Heart rate dropping, Dr. Wells announced from her position monitoring the anesthesia and vital signs. "We're seeing some irregularities in rhythm." Carmen nodded, her focus entirely on the surgical field before her. "That's expected given the extent of the blockage. I can see significant plaque buildup in the left anterior descending artery. We're going to need to perform a triple bypass to restore adequate blood flow." The surgical suite, though private and well-equipped, felt different from the hospital operating rooms where Carmen had spent the prime years of her medical career. There was an intimacy to this setting that made the stakes feel even higher. This wasn't just another patient. This was the man whose family had unknowingly provided her refuge for 8 years. "Dr. Rodriguez," one of the paramedics asked quietly, "what do you need from us?" Carmen continued working as she replied, "I need you to maintain suction here and be ready to assist with retraction when I begin harvesting the graft vessels." "Dr. Wells, how are his oxygen levels?" "Holding steady at 92%. Blood pressure is still low but stable. The anesthesia is maintaining him well." As Carmen worked, she couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 8 years ago, she had fled Venezuela with nothing but the clothes on her back and a suitcase containing a few precious photographs and documents. The country's political upheaval had made it impossible for her to continue practicing medicine, and the threats against intellectuals and professionals had forced her to make the heartbreaking decision to leave everything behind. She remembered her first day working for the Blackwood family, how intimidated she had been by the opulence of their penthouse and the casual way they discussed sums of money that represented more than she had ever seen in her lifetime. Marcus had been all business during the interview, asking practical questions about her experience with household management and her availability for extended hours. Carmen had been truthful about her work experience, but had deliberately omitted her medical background. She had learned quickly that being overqualified often made employers suspicious or uncomfortable, and she needed the job desperately. The decision to present herself as simply an experienced housekeeper had been pragmatic, but it had also been a form of protection. "Preparing to harvest the saphenous vein for the first graft," Carmen announced, shifting her attention to Marcus's leg. The procedure was methodical and familiar, despite the years that had passed since she last performed it. Her hands worked with increasing confidence as the surgery progressed. Dr. Wells observed Carmen's technique with growing amazement. "Dr. Rodriguez, your surgical skills are remarkable. It's clear you've done this many times before." Carmen smiled slightly behind her surgical mask. "Thank you, doctor. I performed my first bypass surgery 15 years ago. It was terrifying then, but the patient survived and went on to live many more years with his family. That's what we're fighting for here." As she worked, Carmen reflected on the conversations she had overheard over the years between Marcus and his business associates. The pharmaceutical industry had made him wealthy, but she had also seen moments of genuine care for the patients who would benefit from his company's medical devices. He wasn't perfect, but he was a man who had built something that helped others, even if his methods were sometimes ruthless. "First graft is ready," Carmen announced, beginning anastomosis to the left anterior descending artery. The most delicate part of the procedure involved connecting the harvested vein to the coronary artery, bypassing the blocked section to restore blood flow to the heart muscle. Carmen's hands moved with steady precision, each suture placed with the care and attention that could mean the difference between life and death. "Dr. Rodriguez," Dr. Wells said quietly, "I have to ask, how did you end up working as a housekeeper?" "Your surgical skills are exceptional." Carmen continued suturing as she replied, "When I arrived in this country, I had no valid medical license, no way to prove my credentials, and no money to begin the lengthy revalidation process. I needed immediate work to survive and to send money back to my family in Venezuela. Mrs. Blackwood hired me based on recommendations from an employment agency, and I've been grateful for the stability this job has provided. But surely you could have found work in the medical field even without full credentials. Hospitals always need experienced staff." Carmen paused for a moment, considering how much to reveal. "Dr. Wells, when you're an undocumented immigrant fleeing political persecution, your options are limited. I couldn't risk drawing attention to myself or my background. Working as household staff provided anonymity and security. I was able to keep my medical knowledge current through online continuing education, but I never imagined I would use it again in a surgical setting." The heart monitor showed improving rhythms as the first bypass began to function properly. Carmen felt a surge of relief as she saw the immediate improvement in blood flow to the previously starved heart muscle. "Excellent work, Dr. Rodriguez," Dr. Wells observed. "I can see improved perfusion already. How many more grafts do you think we'll need?" Carmen assessed the remaining blockages visible on the heart surface. "I want to complete at least 2 more bypasses to ensure adequate revascularization. The right coronary artery has significant stenosis, and there's a blockage in the circumflex artery that's compromising flow to the lateral wall of the heart." As she prepared the second graft, Carmen thought about Victoria's shocked expression when she had revealed her medical background. In 8 years of working for the family, they had never asked about her life before, employment, her education, or her dreams. She had been a competent, reliable presence in their home, but essentially invisible as a person with her own complex history and expertise. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now literally holding Marcus's heart in her hands, performing surgery that would determine whether he lived or died, while for years he had barely acknowledged her existence beyond work-related interactions. She had organized his medications, prepared heart-healthy meals according to his cardiologist's recommendations, and had even been the one to insist he see his doctor after his previous cardiac episode, but he had never thought to ask about her background or qualifications. "Second graft completed," Carmen announced. Moving to the final bypass. The surgery had been progressing for nearly 3 hours, and Carmen could feel the physical strain of standing and working with such intense concentration. Her back ached, and her hands were beginning to cramp from the precise movements required for microsurgery, but her focus remained absolute. Dr. Wells had been monitoring Marcus's condition throughout the procedure and was pleased with his stability. "Vital signs remain good, Dr. Rodriguez. Blood pressure has actually improved since we established the first 2 bypasses. I think he's going to make it through this." Carmen felt a profound sense of relief at those words, but she knew the surgery wasn't complete until every graft was properly connected and the heart was functioning optimally. "Thank you, doctor. 1 more bypass to go, and then we can begin closing." As she worked on the final connection, Carmen reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. 8 years ago, she had walked into the Blackwood home as a desperate refugee, looking for any kind of work to survive. Tonight, she was performing life-saving surgery on the man who had unknowingly provided her with safety and stability during the most difficult period of her life. The final suture was placed with the same meticulous care as the first. Carmen stepped back slightly to assess her work, checking each graft for proper blood flow and ensuring there were no leaks or complications. "All 3 bypasses are complete and functioning well," she announced. "Heart rhythm has normalized, and I can see good perfusion throughout the myocardium." Dr. Wells smiled behind her mask. "Outstanding work, Dr. Rodriguez. I've assisted with many cardiac surgeries, and this has been as skillfully performed as any I've seen in major medical centers." Carmen began the process of closing Marcus's chest, her movements now more relaxed as the critical portion of the surgery was complete. "Thank you, Dr. Wells. I have to admit, I wasn't sure I could still perform at this level after 8 years away from the operating room." "You never really lose those skills," Dr. Wells replied. "Surgery is like riding a bicycle. The knowledge and muscle memory are always there, waiting to be called upon. As Carmen worked on the final closure, she thought about what would happen after Marcus recovered. Would this revelation about her medical background change her relationship with the family? Would they want her to continue working as their housekeeper? Or would they expect her to pursue medical practice again? The questions swirled in her mind, but she pushed them aside to focus on completing the surgery successfully. "Closure complete," Carmen finally announced. "Patient is stable and ready for recovery monitoring." The surgical suite fell quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors showing Marcus's improved vital signs. The surgery had taken nearly 4 hours, and everyone present was exhausted but elated by the successful outcome. Dr. Wells began the process of bringing Marcus out of anesthesia while Carmen removed her surgical gloves and mask. For the first time in 8 years, she had been Dr. Carmen Rodriguez again, and the feeling was both exhilarating and emotionally overwhelming. Victoria, who had been waiting anxiously outside the sterile area, rushed over as soon as she saw Carmen emerge from the surgical suite. "How is he? Did everything go well?" Carmen smiled, exhaustion evident in her face but satisfaction clear in her voice. "The surgery was successful, Mrs. Blackwood. We completed 3 bypass grafts, and his heart function has improved significantly. Dr. Wells is bringing him out of anesthesia now, and with proper recovery, he should make a full recovery." Victoria burst into tears of relief and gratitude, reaching out to embrace Carmen before stopping herself, unsure if such familiarity was appropriate given their changed circumstances. "Carmen, I don't know how to thank you. You saved his life." "Mrs. Blackwood, I was honored to be able to help. Mr. Blackwood gave me a job when I desperately needed one 8 years ago. Being able to return that kindness tonight feels like more than just coincidence." As they waited for Marcus to wake up, Carmen sat down for the first time in hours, the reality of what had just occurred beginning to sink in. She had successfully performed complex cardiac surgery in a non-hospital setting, saving the life of her employer who had never known she possessed such skills. The next few hours would bring recovery, questions, and undoubtedly significant changes to her life. But for now, she was content knowing that Marcus Blackwood would wake up to see another day, and that she had been able to use her medical training for its highest purpose, saving a human life. The recovery room hummed with the quiet efficiency of medical equipment. As Marcus Blackwood slowly emerged from anesthesia, his eyelids fluttered, struggling against the fog of medication while his brain worked to process unfamiliar sensations and sounds. The first thing he noticed was the absence of pain in his chest, replaced instead by a dull pressure that felt oddly reassuring. Carmen sat in a chair beside his bed, no longer wearing surgical scrubs, but back in her simple work clothes. She had been monitoring his vital signs for the past 2 hours, her trained eye catching every fluctuation in his heart rhythm and breathing patterns. The successful surgery had left her emotionally drained but professionally satisfied in a way she hadn't experienced in 8 years. "Where am I?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, his throat dry from the breathing tube that had been removed an hour earlier. Carmen leaned forward, offering him a small cup of ice chips. "You're in the medical suite in your building, Mr. Blackwood. You've just had cardiac surgery. Everything went very well." Marcus tried to sit up, wincing at the soreness in his chest. The memories came flooding back slowly, fragmented images of the gala, the crushing pain, the panic in Victoria's eyes. "The surgery. Who performed it? Dr. Wells?" Carmen hesitated, unsure how much Marcus remembered from the chaotic moments before he lost consciousness. "Dr. Wells assisted, but I was the primary surgeon." Marcus stared at her blankly, his medication-clouded mind struggling to process this information. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Mr. Blackwood, I know this is difficult to understand, but I performed your bypass surgery. I'm a cardiac surgeon. I have been for many years." The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. Marcus continued staring at Carmen as if she had suddenly transformed into someone completely different, which in many ways she had. The woman who had quietly maintained his household for 8 years was claiming to have just saved his life through complex heart surgery. "Carmen," he said slowly, testing her name as if hearing it for the first time. "You're telling me that you, my housekeeper, are actually a heart surgeon?" Carmen nodded patiently. "Yes, sir." I graduated from medical school in Venezuela and practiced cardiac surgery for 12 years before coming to work for your family. Last night, when you had your heart attack, there wasn't time to transport you to a hospital safely. I was able to perform the surgery here using your private medical facility. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to reconcile this revelation with everything he thought he knew about his household staff. In 8 years, he had never asked Carmen about her background, her education, or her life before she came to work for him. She had been efficient, reliable, and practically invisible, which was exactly what he had wanted from his domestic staff. "How is this possible?" he asked, opening his eyes to study Carmen's face with new attention. "Why didn't you tell me you were a doctor?" Carmen chose her words carefully. "When I applied for the position 8 years ago, I needed work immediately. My medical credentials from Venezuela weren't recognized here, and the process of revalidation would have taken years and resources I didn't have. I was grateful when Mrs. Blackwood hired me, and I've tried to serve your family well in the capacity you needed." Dr. Wells entered the recovery room, carrying Marcus's updated medical charts. She had been coordinating with the cardiologist who would oversee his long-term recovery and ensuring that all surgical notes were properly documented. "Mr. Blackwood, it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Confused," Marcus replied honestly. "Dr. Wells, is it true what Carmen is telling me? Did she really perform heart surgery on me?" Dr. Wells smiled warmly. "Not only did she perform the surgery, Mr. Blackwood, but she did it with a level of skill and precision that would be impressive in any major medical center. Dr. Rodriguez completed a triple bypass that has restored full blood flow to your heart. You're going to make a complete recovery thanks to her expertise." The title Dr. Rodriguez hung in the air like a foreign concept. Marcus had never heard anyone refer to Carmen by anything other than her first name, and certainly never with the professional respect that the title implied. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her face showing the strain of the long night, but brightened with relief at seeing Marcus awake and alert. "How do you feel, darling?" "The doctors say the surgery was completely successful." Marcus reached for his wife's hand, grateful for her familiar presence in this surreal situation. "Victoria, did you know about Carmen being a doctor?" Victoria shook her head. "I had no idea. None of us did. Marcus, she saved your life. When the paramedics said you might not survive transport to the hospital, Carmen stepped forward and offered to perform the surgery here. I made the decision to let her try because it seemed like our only chance." Marcus looked back at Carmen, who had remained quietly in her chair throughout this exchange. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said, testing the formal address. "I owe you my life." Carmen stood up, smoothing her work clothes nervously. "You owe me nothing, Mr. Blackwood. You gave me employment when I needed it most. I was honored to be able to help you when you needed it most." The simplicity of her response struck Marcus profoundly. Here was someone who had literally held his heart in her hands, who had spent hours performing delicate surgery to save his life, and she was expressing gratitude to him for having given her a job cleaning his house. Dr. Wells interrupted his thoughts with practical medical information. "Mr. Blackwood, your recovery will take several weeks, but Dr. Rodriguez's surgical technique was excellent. The bypasses are functioning perfectly, and your heart muscle is already showing improved function. You'll need to follow strict protocols for diet, exercise, and medication, but there's every reason to expect a full recovery." Over the next several days, as Marcus recuperated in the private medical suite, he found himself observing Carmen with entirely new eyes. She continued to perform many of her usual household duties, but now she also monitored his medical condition with the expertise of a trained cardiac surgeon. She adjusted his medications, monitored his vital signs, and provided medical guidance with a confidence and knowledge that left him astounded. "Carmen," he said one afternoon as she was checking his surgical incision, "tell me about your life before you came to work for us." Carmen paused in her examination, surprised by his sudden interest in her personal history. "What would you like to know, Mr. Blackwood?" "Everything. Your medical training, your practice in Venezuela, why you left. I realize I've never asked you about any of this in 8 years. Carmen settled into the chair beside his bed, considering how much to share. "I grew up in Caracas in a middle-class family. My father was a teacher. My mother worked as a nurse. I was always interested in medicine, particularly cardiology. I worked very hard to get into medical school, and then specialized in cardiac surgery. Marcus listened intently, fascinated by this glimpse into the life of someone he had barely considered as an individual person. You said you practiced for 12 years. You must have been very successful. I was fortunate to work with excellent mentors and to develop expertise in complex procedures. I loved the work, the challenge of saving lives, the precision required. Surgery became not just my profession but my identity. What changed? Why did you leave? Carmen's expression grew somber. The political situation in Venezuela became very difficult. There were crackdowns on intellectuals, professionals, anyone who might be seen as a threat to the regime. Several of my colleagues were arrested or disappeared. I received warnings that I was being watched. It became clear that I had to leave if I wanted to survive. Marcus had read about the Venezuelan crisis in business journals, but always from the perspective of economic impact and investment risks. He had never considered the human cost, the individual stories of professionals forced to abandon their careers and flee their homeland. So you came here with nothing? I came with hope, Carmen replied simply, and determination to rebuild my life in whatever way possible. When I couldn't immediately practice medicine, I found other ways to be useful. Working for your family has provided stability and security that I treasure. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Carmen, I need to apologize to you. She looked surprised. For what, Mr. Blackwood? For 8 years, I treated you as if you were invisible. I never asked about your background, your education, your dreams. I never saw you as a complete person with your own remarkable story. That was wrong of me. Carmen's expression softened. Mr. Blackwood, you provided me with employment when I needed it. You've been fair and respectful. I never expected more than that. But you deserved more than that, Marcus insisted. You deserve to be seen and valued for who you really are. And now, knowing what I know, I can't imagine continuing our relationship as if nothing has changed. This statement hung between them, laden with implications that both understood but neither had fully articulated. Carmen's role in the household could never be the same after she had demonstrated surgical skills that had literally saved Marcus's life. Victoria joined them later that evening, bringing dinner and settling into the conversation that would determine Carmen's future with their family. Carmen, Marcus and I have been talking, and we want to discuss some options with you. Carmen looked between them attentively, uncertain what to expect. Marcus cleared his throat. First, I want to formally thank you for saving my life. Dr. Wells told me that without immediate surgical intervention, I wouldn't have survived the night. You gave me the gift of continued life, and I can never adequately repay that. Mr. Blackwood, really, that's not necessary. Please, let me finish. Carmen, we know that you're overqualified for your current position, and we know that you have skills and expertise that could benefit many people. We want to help you return to medicine if that's what you want. Carmen's heart began to race. The possibility of returning to surgical practice had seemed like an impossible dream for so long that she had trained herself not to think about it. Victoria continued. We've spoken with our lawyers about what it would take to help you revalidate your medical credentials. We're prepared to fund the entire process, including any additional training or certification requirements, as well as provide you with a salary during the transition period. The offer was generous beyond anything Carmen had imagined. Mrs. Blackwood, that's incredibly kind, but I couldn't possibly accept such an expensive gift. Marcus leaned forward earnestly. Carmen, you saved my life! The cost of medical revalidation is nothing compared to what you've given me. But more than that, the world needs skilled cardiac surgeons. Your talents shouldn't be wasted cleaning houses, no matter how well you do it. Carmen felt tears welling in her eyes. The possibility of returning to surgery, of using her skills to save lives again, was almost overwhelming to contemplate. I would love nothing more than to practice medicine again, but there are practical considerations. The revalidation process could take years, and I have financial obligations to my family in Venezuela. We've thought about that too, Victoria said gently. We'd like to offer you a transitional position as a private medical consultant to our family and Marcus's company. The pharmaceutical business involves medical advisory work that would utilize your expertise while you complete the revalidation process. The salary would be commensurate with your qualifications and experience, Marcus added. And Carmen, we want you to know that regardless of what you decide about returning to medicine, you will always have a place in our family. What you did for me, for us, goes beyond any employment relationship. Carmen was overwhelmed by their generosity and the sudden transformation in how they viewed her. After years of being valued primarily for her ability to maintain their household efficiently, she was now being offered the opportunity to reclaim her professional identity and return to the work she loved. I need some time to think about this, she said finally. It's a wonderful offer, but it represents such a significant change from the life I've built here. Of course, Marcus replied. Take all the time you need. But Carmen, I want you to know something else. During my recovery, I've been thinking about a lot of things, including how I treat the people who work for me. You've opened my eyes to the fact that I've been missing out on knowing some remarkable individuals. Over the following weeks, as Marcus continued his recovery, the dynamic in the Blackwood household gradually shifted. Carmen found herself increasingly involved in medical discussions with Marcus's cardiologist and other specialists. Her insights into his condition and treatment options were valued and respected, marking a dramatic change from her previous invisible status. Marcus began asking other staff members about their backgrounds and interests, genuinely curious about the people who had been working in his home for years. He discovered that his driver had a degree in engineering, that one of the security guards was a published poet, and that the chef had trained at culinary school in France. He realized that he had been surrounded by talented, interesting people, while remaining completely oblivious to their individual stories and capabilities. You know what's ironic? Marcus said to Carmen one morning as she was reviewing his medication schedule. I've spent my career in the pharmaceutical industry, supposedly dedicated to improving healthcare and helping patients. But I never really understood what it meant to have my life saved by a skilled physician until you operated on me. Carmen smiled. Medicine is very personal when it's your own life at stake. I think that's why doctor-patient relationships are so important to healing. Have you thought more about our offer? About returning to medicine? Carmen nodded. I've been researching the revalidation requirements and speaking with some contacts in the medical community. It would take approximately 2 years of additional training and examination to obtain full licensing here. But Marcus, I want you to understand something. Even if I do this, even if I become Dr. Rodriguez again officially, I will never forget that you and Victoria gave me a second chance at life when I needed it most. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, Carmen, I think you gave me a second chance too. Not just medically, but in terms of how I see the world and the people around me. You've made me a better person. 3 months after the surgery, Carmen began the process of medical revalidation with Marcus and Victoria's full support. She enrolled in the required courses and examinations while continuing to work as a medical consultant for Blackwood Pharmaceuticals. Her expertise in cardiac surgery proved invaluable in evaluating new medical devices and treatment protocols. The pharmaceutical company's research and development team was initially skeptical about taking guidance from someone who had been working as household staff, but Carmen's knowledge and insights quickly won their respect. She provided critical feedback on the design of new cardiac devices and helped identify potential improvements that could save more lives. Dr. Rodriguez, the head of R&D, said during one meeting, Your clinical perspective on these devices is exactly what we've been missing. You understand not just the technical specifications, but how they actually function during real surgical procedures. Carmen felt a deep satisfaction in being able to contribute her medical expertise to developing better treatments for cardiac patients. It was a different application of her skills than direct surgery, but it felt like a meaningful way to help people while she worked toward full revalidation. Marcus, meanwhile, made a complete recovery from his surgery and returned to work with a renewed appreciation for the medical professionals who had saved his life. He established a scholarship fund for international medical professionals seeking to practice in the United States, inspired by Carmen's story and the barriers she had faced. I want other talented physicians like Carmen to have an easier path to practicing medicine here, he explained to the board of directors when announcing the scholarship program. We're missing out on incredible expertise because of bureaucratic obstacles and financial barriers. The program quickly gained recognition in the medical community, helping dozens of international physicians navigate the complex revalidation process. Marcus found that his personal experience with Carmen had given him insights into healthcare that improved his business decisions and made his company's products more effective. One evening, nearly a year after the surgery, Carmen was working late in her new office at Blackwood Pharmaceuticals when Marcus stopped by with coffee. He had made it a habit to check in with her regularly, their relationship having evolved into something resembling genuine friendship. "How are the board examinations going?" he asked, settling into a chair across from her desk. "Challenging but manageable," Carmen replied. "I'm scheduled to take the final examination in 3 months. If I pass, I'll be eligible for full medical licensing and can begin looking for surgical positions." Marcus nodded, though he couldn't help feeling a sense of loss at the prospect of Carmen leaving his company to return to full-time surgical practice. "Have you thought about where you'd like to practice? I imagine you'll have many options." Carmen considered this question carefully. "I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. Part of me wants to return to the operating room immediately, to get back to performing surgery, but I've also discovered that I enjoy the work I'm doing here, helping to develop better medical devices and treatments. It's a different way of helping patients, but it's meaningful work." "You don't have to choose one or the other," Marcus suggested. "Many cardiac surgeons maintain both clinical practice and research, or consulting work. You could potentially do both." Carmen smiled at the possibility. "I never imagined having so many options when I first came to work for your family. I thought I was giving up medicine forever." Marcus reflected on how much had changed in their relationship and in his own perspective. "Carmen, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret the years you spent working as a housekeeper? Do you feel like that time was wasted?" Carmen was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "No, I don't regret it. Those years taught me things that medical school never could. I learned humility, patience, and the value of service to others. I learned to find dignity in any honest work. And most importantly, I learned that my worth as a person isn't dependent on my professional title or recognition from others." Marcus was struck by the wisdom in her response. "You're remarkable, you know that? Most people would be bitter about having to give up such a successful career." "Bitterness is a luxury I couldn't afford," Carmen replied simply. "I had to focus on survival and rebuilding. Besides, everything that happened led me to this moment. If I hadn't been working for your family, I wouldn't have been there to help you that night. Sometimes our detours become our destinations." As Carmen prepared to take her final medical examinations, word of her story began to spread within the medical community. The tale of the housekeeper who turned out to be a cardiac surgeon captured imaginations and sparked discussions about how society values different types of work and the hidden talents that exist all around us. Medical journals published articles about her case, using it to highlight the barriers faced by international medical professionals and the need for better systems to recognize and utilize existing expertise. Carmen found herself invited to speak at medical conferences about her experiences and the lessons learned from her unique journey. "The most important thing I learned," she told one audience of medical students, "is that being a physician isn't just about the technical skills or the professional recognition. It's about being ready to help when someone needs it, regardless of the circumstances or your official capacity." The night before her final examination, Carmen sat in her apartment, surrounded by medical textbooks and study materials. The same leather-bound notebook she had used years earlier to prepare for Marcus's surgery lay open on her desk, now filled with notes from her revalidation studies. Her phone rang, and she was surprised to see Marcus's name on the caller ID. "Carmen, I hope I'm not disturbing your studying." "Not at all, Mr. Blackwood. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to call and wish you luck tomorrow, though I know you don't need it. You're the most capable person I know." Carmen was touched by his call. "Thank you. I have to admit, I'm nervous. It's been so long since I took a formal medical examination." "Carmen, you saved my life with skills you hadn't used in 8 years. I have complete confidence that you'll pass this examination with flying colors." After hanging up, Carmen reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this point. From a successful cardiac surgeon in Venezuela to a refugee housekeeper to a medical consultant and now back to the verge of full medical practice, her path had been anything but linear. The examination the next day was rigorous and comprehensive, testing not only her medical knowledge but her practical skills and clinical judgment. When she emerged 8 hours later, Carmen felt cautiously optimistic about her performance, though she would have to wait several weeks for the results. Marcus, Victoria, and several colleagues from Blackwood Pharmaceuticals took her out to dinner that evening to celebrate completing the examination process, regardless of the outcome. "Dr. Rodriguez," Victoria said, raising her glass in a toast, "whatever happens with the examination results, we want you to know how proud we are of everything you've accomplished." The results arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Carmen opened the envelope with trembling hands, Victoria and Marcus standing anxiously beside her in the Blackwood living room, where this journey had begun nearly 2 years earlier. "I passed," she said quietly, staring at the official notification. "I'm a licensed physician again." The celebration that followed was joyful but also bittersweet, as everyone understood that this achievement marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Carmen would soon be leaving her consulting position to return to surgical practice, though she had accepted an offer that would allow her to maintain some research work with Blackwood Pharmaceuticals. "Dr. Rodriguez," Marcus said formally during the celebration, "I have something for you." He handed her an elegant wooden box, and when she opened it, she found a set of engraved surgical instruments with her name and credentials properly inscribed. "These are for your return to the operating room. I wanted you to have instruments that reflect who you really are." Carmen was deeply moved by the gesture. "Marcus, this is too generous. You've already done so much for me." "Carmen, you gave me my life back. These instruments will help you give that gift to many other patients. It seems like a fair exchange to me." As Carmen prepared to begin her new position as a cardiac surgeon at one of the city's leading medical centers, she reflected on the profound changes that had occurred in her relationship with the Blackwood family. What had begun as an employer-employee relationship had evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. The invisible housekeeper had become Dr. Carmen Rodriguez again, but more than that, she had become a valued friend and respected colleague. Her story had inspired changes not only in how Marcus viewed the people around him, but in how his company approached international talent, and how the medical community thought about recognizing expertise wherever it might be found. The morning of her first day back in surgery, Carmen stood in the hospital locker room, putting on scrubs for the first time in nearly a decade. The familiar ritual felt both foreign and completely natural, like returning to a home she had been away from for far too long. Her hands were steady as she prepared for her first case, a coronary bypass surgery remarkably similar to the procedure she had performed on Marcus in his private medical suite. But this time, she was operating in a fully equipped hospital with a complete surgical team, officially recognized for her qualifications and expertise. As she scrubbed in, Carmen thought about the extraordinary journey that had brought her back to this moment. From the desperate refugee who had cleaned houses to survive, to the accomplished surgeon who was about to save another life, her path had been marked by setbacks and transformations that had tested every aspect of her character and resilience. The patient today was a grandmother of 6, who had been experiencing chest pain for weeks before finally seeking medical attention. Her family waited anxiously in the hospital waiting room, much as Victoria had waited during Marcus's surgery, hoping that skilled hands and medical expertise could provide a miracle. Carmen entered the operating room with confidence and purpose, ready to do what she had always been meant to do: save lives through the precise application of surgical skill and unwavering dedication to healing. The invisible housekeeper was gone forever, replaced by Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, cardiac surgeon, whose hands held not just instruments, but hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.